Alright, this is a video on calculating compound interest. When we calculate compound interest, we use the formula A equals P times the quantity 1 plus R divided by N to the N times T power. P is the amount of money that you borrow. Since we're talking about a loan, it's really the principal, but we're going to talk about what we borrow. R is the interest rate of the loan. The interest rate is always given to us as a percent, and we need to turn that into a decimal. The way that we do that is we drop the percent sign, and we remember to move the decimal 2 places to the left. N is the number of times per year interest can be compounded. So if you have a loan that's compounded quarterly, that means that the interest is compounded 4 times a year. If you have a loan that is compounded annually, that's just compounded 1 time a year. If it's compounded monthly, there are 12 months in a year, so that's 12 times a year. If it's compounded daily, there are 365 days in a year. All right, so N is the number of times per year that your interest is compounded. T is the time and years that you will be paying on the loan. For example, a mortgage is usually 20 years or 30 years. Sometimes people have 10-year mortgages. All right. Okay, so let's calculate some interest. Mrs. Bischoff borrowed $72,000 to buy and remodel a home. Mrs. Bischoff wants to calculate her mortgage payment based on a 10-year loan at an interest rate of 3.2%, which is to be compounded quarterly. Let's see what we know. $72,000 is the amount of money that I borrowed. $72,000 is what I borrowed, which is P, the principal. I know that my interest rate is 3.2%. My interest rate is 3.2%, and that represents R. Now I need to remember to turn that percent into a decimal. So remember, I'm going to write it without the percent sign, and then I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to the left. So my interest rate is going to be 0.032. I need to figure out how long I'm going to have this loan and how many times the interest will be compounded. So let's see, the time of my loan is 10 years. So I'm going to have a time of 10 years, meaning I will be paying on this loan for 10 years. T is 10. And then N, the number of compounding periods, is 4, because my loan is compounded quarterly, and there are 4 quarters per year. So I'm going to take this information and plug it into my formula to calculate A, the amount of money I will owe. So A equals P, my principal or the amount borrowed, which is $72,000, times the quantity 1 plus R, my rate, 0.032, divided by N, the number of compounding periods, which is 4, all raised to the N times T, or 4 times 10 power. All right, so before you freak out, let's just do it a step at a time. Let's figure out what 0.032 divided by 4 is. So 0.032 divided by 4 is 0.008. Now I can figure out what 4 times 10 is, and 4 times 10 is 40. So that looks much better already. All right, now let's figure out what 1 plus 0.008 is. Well, that's just 1.008, and we're going to raise that to the 40th power. So in my calculator, I'm going to take 72,000 times 1.008 to the 40th power. All right, and when I do that, I'm going to find out that my loan amount The amount that I owe is $99,027.04. So my $72,000 loan is going to end up being a $99,000 loan when I repay it. Now I'm going to borrow that same amount of money, $72,000, only this time I'm going to take out a 20-year loan. So the amount I borrow, P, is $72,000. My rate, still 3.2%, as a decimal is 0.032. It's compounded quarterly, so N is still 4. And again, I said the time on this loan, we're going to change to 20. So this is going to be a 20-year loan, or T equals 20. T is the only number that has changed in this situation. So P is $72,000 plus the quantity, or times the quantity 1 plus my rate, same thing, 0.032, divided by 4, the number of compounding periods, multiplied by the compounding period and time, N times T, so 4 times 20. So again, nothing has changed, so I know that the 0.032 divided by 4 is going to be a 0.008. So I have the quantity 1 plus 0.008, all raised to the 80th power. 72,000 times 1.008 to the 80th power. So in my calculator, I'm going to take 72,000 and multiply it by 1.008 to the 80th power. And when I do that, I'm going to see that my new amount owed to the bank will be $136,199.36. All right, now let's calculate my mortgage, or my total amount owed, if I take out a 30-year loan. So I'm still going to borrow the $72,000. It is still at an interest rate of 3.2%. It is still going to be compounded quarterly. However, the time on this loan is going to be 30 years. So let's input the information that we know. The principal, $72,000, times the quantity 1 plus the rate, 0.032, divided by the number of compounding periods, 4, raised to the power of 4 times my years, 30. 72,000 times the quantity 1.008 to the 120th power. So when I calculate that, I determine that the amount I'm going to owe the bank for a 30-year loan is $187,325.26. How much more money would Mrs. Bischoff pay in interest for a 30-year loan versus a 20-year loan? So we're loan, which is $187,325.26, and subtract $136,199.36. So when I subtract the two, I determined that I would end up paying $51,126 more for that extra 10 years. So I'd pay an additional $51,000 in interest. Now, how much would I pay for a 10-year loan versus the 30-year? Well, again, the 30-year loan ends up costing me $187,000 minus my 10-year loan of $99,027. So it end up paying an additional $88,000. My next question is, how much would Mrs. Bischoff's monthly mortgage payments be on a 30-year mortgage? So I'm going to take my total loan amount, which would be $187,000. So for this, I take the number of months in 30 years, which is 360, and I take my total dollar amount, $187,325, and I need to divide that by 360 months, or 360 payments. So $187,325 divided by 360 is $520.35. So I would end up paying $520.35 per month for my 30-year mortgage. Now, to calculate the monthly payments on a 20-year mortgage, I would take the total of my 20-year mortgage, the total amount that I owe the bank, which is $136,199. And I need to take that and divide it by the total number of months in a 20-year period. So that's 20 times 12 months. So that would be 240 payments. I would be able to make 240 payments. So the total, $136,199.36 divided by the total number of payments, or 240, equals $567.50. That is the amount that I would pay monthly for a 20-year mortgage. Lastly, let's calculate the monthly payments on a 10-year mortgage. So I need the total amount of my amount owed, which is $99,027.04. And I'm going to take that total and divide it by the number of months in a 10-year period. So 10 times 12 is 120. So I'm essentially going to take $99,027.04 and divide it by 120 payments. So my new monthly payment for a 10-year mortgage is $825.22. So it's $825.22 a month.